Welcome to another episode of 9 to 5 Mac Weekly, where that is interesting. We cried when they took the ports away, now we will cry when they bring it back. Yep, sounds about right. I'm your host, Miles Somerville, and if you're a fan of good ideas, consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a thumbs up if you enjoy what you see. We've had our little 2-month break, but it's time to dive in back into iPhone rumors. This year we're expecting 4 different models, so let's dive in and see what this year's iPhones are going to look like. So firstly, thanks to Ming-Chi Kuo, we can now say with some confidence that we'll be getting a mini, regular size model, and then 2 Pro model iPhones this year. I know the recent sales numbers of the 12 mini have not been promising. Not a lot of people actually want to pay $700 for an iPhone that small, but Apple isn't discouraged, and so we'll see an iPhone 13 mini this year. Kuo reported that the screen sizes will remain the same for this year's models as well, which means we'll be getting a 5.4, 6.1, and 6.7 inch phones this year as well. So physically, the screens will feel the same in your hand, but once you turn it on and start swiping, things are going to get interesting. Kuo's saying that the next iPhone will feature an 120Hz refresh rate display, just like what we've got on the iPad Pro, and that's going to be an awesome feature. But this is not cause for celebration because, in my eyes, Apple is literally the last company to show up to the HFR party. OnePlus, Samsung, Google, and others have all already put in high refresh rate displays on their flagships, so this isn't something to get excited about in my opinion, but it's very much good and about freaking time that they added this in. And in addition to that, the new displays will utilize more power efficient displays, which they're surely going to need for maintaining that solid battery life with that high refresh rate. And then, according to Kuo, we are finally getting a reduced notch area, which I think is definitely a needed upgrade. The front of the iPhone has looked exactly the same for nearly 5 years now. Think about that. For nearly half a decade, they've maintained the same notch size. Crazy. But that's not all. In addition to that, the iPhone 13 should feature an always-on display. This is info coming from Max Weinbach, who's had some iPhone leaks in the past. I never felt like the iPhone needed an always-on display, but I'm game for it personally. I feel like Apple should have an interesting take on it. Touch ID has been a loose rumor as far as it making a return on the iPhone 13, and I think this is due to a few different factors. The fact that everyone since March of 2020 has been very frustrated with using Face ID, at least those of us who are wearing a mask. And then the fact that the new iPad Air adopted a form of Touch ID that would be a great fit for the iPhone. But according to Kuo, there's no sign of life for Touch ID, and that's unfortunate, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be a deal breaker for most people already interested in the iPhone. And then there's USB-C. People have been clamoring for the iPhone to ditch Lightning and adopt USB-C, and I was definitely one of those people, but just like Touch ID, Kuo says in his report that USB-C probably isn't going to be a thing, like, at all. What Apple gains from using Lightning is apparently just too important for them to switch it to Type-C. Even though using Type-C just makes more sense as a tech product, it's objectively better than Lightning, but Apple don't care. The iPhone is never going to be the perfect smartphone, and this is just another one of those reasons why. We don't have all the specifics on the camera just yet, but the leaks are starting to come in. Kuo's reporting that there are going to be several changes to the iPhone's camera system for the 13 series. The first of which being an upgraded wide-angle sensor inside of the 13 Pro and Pro Max. The current 12 Pros have a 2.4 megapixel fixed focus ultra wide angle lens, but the 13 Pros should feature an f1.8 lens with autofocus. And that makes me wonder if Apple's potentially going for some sort of wide angle portrait mode. That would be really freaking cool, to be honest. And then Kuo's reporting that the LiDAR scanner will still be a thing, but once again, only on the Pro models. In the battery department, Kuo expects the new iPhone 13s to feature an even larger battery, making the 13 slightly heavier than the 12 series. And this makes sense, perfect sense, because like I said, these phones are going to need the best batteries they can fit inside that chassis with the addition of 120Hz. And then the 5G modem inside the iPhone 13 will be an upgraded 5nm chip instead of the 7nm chip we have inside of the iPhone 12 series. How that'll translate to real-world 5G performance, I don't really know, but I'm pretty interested to find out. Based on how things are looking now, I think we can very much expect an S-level iPhone upgrade this year. Why is Apple deciding to ditch the S branding? I'm not sure, even though it's also not confirmed that the S branding is being removed. But this year's iPhones are going to be all about refinement, improving the camera experience further, as always, upgrading the display to that 120Hz panel, adding bigger batteries, slimming down the notch. None of these are groundbreaking additions per se, but the 12 series was already really solid, and I think they're heading in the right direction with the 13. But outside of everything that's leaked, I would personally love to see MagSafe be improved. Getting true 30 watt or 40 watt fast charging would make MagSafe a lot more useful for charging, but knowing Apple, that could be years away, honestly. Now, we just got through talking about this year's unreleased iPhones, but let's move on to talk about next year's unreleased iPhone, shall we? We got even more reports from Kuo saying that Apple's planning on releasing a new iPhone SE in the first half of 2022, and it'll be Apple's newest and cheapest phone with 5G capability. I don't think 5G will improve that much, even in 2022, to where that should be a big deal, but in general, it is a pretty big deal for Apple to introduce a lower-end iPhone and budget-friendly iPhone into the marketplace with 5G. As far as the phone's design, Kuo is expecting the SE to be modeled after the iPhone 8, which essentially means it'll look exactly like the current iPhone SE. There have been rumors of an iPhone SE Plus over the past year or so, but it seems like that sort of fizzled away. This new iPhone SE is expected to be the same size as the current model, but that's pretty much all the info we've got so far. Visually, it'll be the same, and it should have 5G. I think a really weak link with the iPhone SE was battery life, and throwing in a 5G modem is definitely not going to help with that at all off rip. So I think this phone definitely needs to have a bigger battery, and having an iPhone 8 design style in 2022 is kind of weird to me, but if it's rocking the latest internal processing power and perhaps the latest iPhone camera, I think it could be a great device if it comes in under $500 like the previous models. And then within the same report, Kuo has a few tidbits on the 2022 flagship iPhone, or the iPhone 14. Apple's apparently going to ditch the notch design in 2022 in favor of a hole punch design similar to what Samsung's doing with the Galaxy flagships. Presumably the hole punch would be for the front-facing camera on the phone, and honestly, I'm game for it. I think people have responded relatively well to the hole punch design in general, and it seems like a logical step forward that'll allow users to feel like they've truly got a new smartphone visually. And then the mic drop, which also really isn't a mic drop because we kind of knew this was going to come at some point, is that Apple is indeed developing a foldable iPhone, and according to Kuo, it should be coming sometime in 2023. It'll apparently be between 7.5 and 8 inches and be a revolutionary new folding device from Apple. That's pretty much all we got as far as specifics on this folding device. We don't know what kind of folding device it would be, but I'm very curious to see what Apple's take on a folding device would look like, but we've still got at least 2 years before we see that come to the light of day. And with this news, in addition to the previous reports we got about Apple developing a phone that doesn't even have a notch in 2022 and adopting a hole punch design, it really does seem like Apple's moving towards a completely full screen design like those unrealistic Google renders we see for the iPhone 15 and 16. But let's see what you guys have to say about these new iPhone rumors. And by the way, I got a couple comments on the last video saying that I was reading tweets, and these are not tweets at all. These are just comments from 9to5mac.com posted under the articles that I'm referencing here. So if you want to be featured in the video potentially, if you leave a comment on any of those articles, you might make it in. There really is no excuse not to bring Touch ID back. It is more secure and faster. Face ID doesn't always authenticate. I wish I wouldn't have given up my iPhone 8 Plus. Apple has the technology, just do it. That's crazy that we have someone using an iPhone with Face ID but prefers their older iPhone 8 Plus simply because of Touch ID. I find that really interesting. Me personally, I do miss the functionality of Touch ID amidst this pandemic, but otherwise I don't really have a problem with Face ID. This pandemic will be over eventually, and it's not going to be a necessity to have Touch ID in the iPhone, but I think having the option to have both would be really great, and I don't think that's unjustified for an $1,000+ smartphone. So yes, I agree, Apple should do it, they can do it, and hopefully they will. My only wishes are for a completely notch-free display and really improved battery life. In that case, I will upgrade my XS immediately, or we'll skip the 13. Yeah, I definitely don't think we're getting a notch-free display in 2021, maybe 2022, but more than likely that'll be a 2023 thing. At least that's my prediction. I don't have any solid knowledge to suggest otherwise, but I do think that the iPhone 13 is going to be solid, and even coming from a XS Max, it's not going to be a revolutionary upgrade per se, but I do think you're going to notice the difference, especially with the camera. Apple's mistake is not making the Pro available in mini format. I want all the features in the Max available in the smallest form factor. Simple. You see, in theory, that sounds really great, but Clearly, it didn't even work for their $700 iPhone 12 mini, so why would people necessarily want that for a pro version of an iPhone, to pay more money for an iPhone that's small? Yes, you're gonna have the upgraded camera and the slightly improved build quality and all the other little things that you get with the Pro versus the standard iPhone models, but you're still gonna have that really small battery, and I really do think that is a deal breaker for a lot of people. If they go portless, I will switch to a different brand. I don't think we're gonna get a portless iPhone even in the next year or so, but probably 2023 and beyond, I think that's a very, very, very high possibility. So you may be switching to a new brand in the next few years. That's what it sounds like. Assuming these upgrades are correct, it doesn't seem nearly compelling enough to upgrade from the 12s, in my honest opinion. And I agree. I think most people who have a 12 are not going to really feel the need to upgrade to the 13. Like I said, this year's iPhone is going to be all about refinement, and I don't think you're going to be yearning to upgrade your 12 to a 13. But I think the 13 is going to be a really nice phone. But that's about it for this episode. The iPhone leaks are only going to be more plentiful and detailed from here, so strap in, because I'm sure we're going to have all kinds of leaks and info dropping over the next 4 to 5 months leading up to the phone's release. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for future content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.